Welcome to the latest edition of the magazine, and welcome to 2021, a new year with new hope. Today we have Beth David, our very own from Fairhaven, and we're going to hear a lot about journalism and get some interesting information from Beth this time. She's going to be the one that's going to be interviewed. So welcome, Beth.
Hey, welcome to 2021. Like you said, new hope.
New hope, a new year.
A new year, a new hope. And it's a nice, beautiful day out there. Not a bad way to start it.
Exactly. So, Beth, a lot of people know you from the neighborhood news, but they don't really know how you got into journalism, or how did this all begin?
Well, let's see. You said I was from Fairhaven. I didn't grow up in Fairhaven. I've lived here for 27 years. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that really counts. Kind of like the island. If you weren't born there, you were never born there. But my aunt bought a place on Goulart, not quite on West Island, when I was little. So I fell in love with the place a long time ago. When it came time for me to buy a house, I bought a little house on West Island. At the time, I was working as a typesetter, right? Yeah. Well, kind of a production idol. Let's go back a little. In my first jobs out of the New Bedford area, I got a job in Boston working at an advertising agency.
Okay.
And so I became familiar with taking ads, getting information, putting the ads together. The art department did that. Back in those days, it was cut and paste. You literally would cut them, paste them down on a piece of paper, and then you'd send them off to the newspapers. The newspapers would also paste them down and then take a picture of the whole broadsheet page and then do their thing over there. So I kind of learned from the ground up. And then they started doing typesetting. We started doing it in-house.
Mm-hmm. What is typesetting? Because
typesetting is when you make the actual letters.
Okay.
Okay. Actually, let me back up. When I first started, we didn't do what I just said. We didn't do that. We used to send it to the newspapers, and they would do the typesetting. Then we got the typesetting machine. So see, well, look at this. Perfect. Marijuana medicine. This is a cover of National Geographic. So this is the type. Okay. It's fonts, and somebody has to put those in there. Okay. I mean, now everybody's got a PC. You type it in, and it does it for you. But back then, a headline, they would do it by hand.
Oh, wow.
The guys, the artists would take it. We called it press type. Older people will remember even before that, where they used hot type or something. And you would press it down and peel it off, and you'd make your headline. And then we would send that to the papers, and they would fill in all the rest of the text. When we got our own typesetting machine at that agency, I would type it in. And so I would do each line, okay? I would type in each line.
Wow.
I'd do the line breaks and everything, so you'd see how it would flow in there. What's bold, what's big, what's small. And then they would take that and cut it out and put it in the ad. It was an ad agency, all we do was ad. And then we'd send that off to the papers. And then it progressed to the point where you would do the whole thing. Okay. That was, back then, it was probably 4 lines of type you could see. It was all codes. You didn't see a thing until it came out.
Oh, wow.
I can't remember. I was telling somebody the other day, I can't remember a single code. I used to type it like this and be talking to people, and it was these and those. And I can't remember a single code. I was good at it, too, I have to say. So I ended up freelancing for like 15 years. Running the next level of that machine was, they called it WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get.
Okay.
That's what we all have now. And they were big, expensive machines. It was a chemical process, just like photography. The thing would come out, you'd run it through the chemicals, all this stuff. And I did that for 15 years. I freelanced.
Okay.
So at that point, I've learned how to do all these different aspects of the paper, because when I freelanced as a typesetter, I worked at the Bay State Banner, was a little weekly newspaper. That was the newspaper that catered to the black community, African-American community all over New England. And I worked at all the funky little ones in the Boston area. I worked at ad agencies. I worked at in-house places like Jordan Marsh had a beautiful in-house art department. Oh, I loved that place. I worked there for years. Always as a freelancer, so it was by the hour. And then I got a job working a few days a week. It was 4 days, so it was considered full-time at another ad agency. I moved back down here kind of in between. I was kind of in between jobs when the industry changed.
Mm-hmm. How did it change? Do you mean?
It changed when everything went to the PCs.
Okay.
We didn't need typesetters anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But we still needed production artists.
Mm-hmm.
So you still had to put the ad together. To me, it was just using a different machine. But it was a little hard getting in somewhere where they would say, yeah, you can do this. Mm-hmm. So I found a place. Again, it kind of went back to my roots. The same kind of, it was a recruitment advertising agency which is where I had started. And I was actually working 1 day a week only. And I was living up here, mooching off my parents. I was like, I don't know how old I was in my early 30s. I mooched off them for about a year. And then eventually, people realized as the industry changed, you still needed production artists. Mm-hmm. But then I started doing copywriting, I started doing headlining, I started doing all kinds of different stuff. And I was driving back and forth. That's when I bought my house here on West Island. And I drove back and forth for a few years I had Needham, Newton, Boston, working at a couple of places. And then I quit and started my own ad agency. I started working out of the house here.
Okay.
And that went okay for a year or two, but it really didn't really quite. I was not exactly a mogul. So I started supplementing my income by freelancing for the Standard Times. Okay. I covered the town of Fairhaven. I covered select board meetings for 1 year, about. It was like 13 months, I think, and they were amazed. They were like, "You didn't miss a single meeting," and I was like, I kind of liked it. I didn't even know what a select board was, honestly. And I was like, this is really cool. I know what's going on. I was like, people would talk about stuff, and I'd say, oh, I can tell you about that. And we had a little newspaper, as you know, a little weekly newspaper in Fairhaven called the Free Press. Mm-hmm. That was run by a woman right around the corner. She ran it out of her home here, also on West Island. And I'm sitting actually right where you're sitting, and my neighbor called me up. He said, hey, the Free Press is going out of business. Not going out of business. Let me rephrase that. She's retiring. Mm-hmm. And she had announced it, and I was like, you got to be kidding me. So, because I had been trying to figure out what to do at that point. I had my ad agency. Mm-hmm. It was making enough that you didn't want to shut it down. I had enough clients who depended on me, but it wasn't really making enough to live on. Mm. I was trying to supplement my income with the Standard Times, but what were they paying me? $35 a story, $50 a story. Yeah, how many stories can you write when you're also doing another job? So I literally was sitting there just trying to decide, what am I going to do next? Am I going to shut everything down? Do I go to another ad agency, take my clients with me? Do I just look for another job? And she stopped publishing. And I actually spoke with her. I considered buying hers, but she had pretty much shut it down, and that didn't go well. And so I just said, I'll start my own. Great. I figured, and I knew I needed to do it immediately, mm-hmm. because I didn't want there to be a gap. If there was a 6-month gap, then they would have said, well, we don't need it. We've done without it this long.
Right.
Called Jimmy Califf at Fairhaven Lumber. He mm-hmm. was the first person I called because he knew me. He's Lebanese. We grew up in the same community. Mm-hmm. And I said, Jimmy, this is what I'm thinking of doing. What do you think? He said, what do you need? I said, I need advertising. You got it. He hadn't even finished the word. Mm-hmm. And I said, that's what I need, because I need, and he said, you got it. If he had said, gee, I don't know, that's a bad idea. You sure you can do this? I probably still would have done it, but he didn't let me finish the word. Because he knew me. We had, right. when my brother-in-law and I had published a magazine called The Legacy, mm-hmm. for the Lebanese community in New Bedford. We did that for a few years. And again, when I was a freelance typesetter, mm-hmm. I got permission from 2 different places to let me do it there, because it was a lot. You didn't want to do it all at once. They both gave me permission to use their machines, and we would do the type, and then we'd go and we would put it together, literally in my brother-in-law's basement, before he was my brother-in-law, in his basement, and we'd paste it down, and we went to a printer, and they... so, I mean, I had that background of doing all the different pieces. Okay. At least I thought I did.
Well, and special recognition to Jim Califf for.
Oh, Jimmy was great. Jimmy
great.
was, and he's been advertising with me in every single issue since then.
Excellent. He's a great guy.
I have to look back at that first issue to see if there's anyone who's. I mean, I'd hate to leave anybody out who isn't, but he was the first guy I called, and so that's why he gets that special, because he remembered the legacy, and he was like, whatever you want to do, I know you'll do great at it. Awesome. I want to help. And his father and my father were also what we like to call best rivals.
Okay.
You know, again, the Lebanese community, my father had his own business, Johnny Califf had his own business, and they used to a little bit, but they loved each other, and they supported each other. My father never bought a piece of wood anywhere besides Fairhaven Lumber, and I'm kind of like that too with my advertising.
Yeah.
And when does work here, one of my first questions is, you got a problem with Fairhaven Lumber? They say yes. I'm like, yeah, I got somebody else.
Yeah.
I've never had anyone say yes, by the way.
I wouldn't think so. It's a great company. So that started the neighborhood news, and you showed me earlier this wonderful note that you got in the mail years ago. For your first ever story on the Polar Plunge, I believe it is.
It was the Polar Plunge.
And it's you as a reporter,
yep.
And I'm sure that Dave will show this elsewhere too, so people can see that. And who was that from?
It was from Myra Lopes, a friend of mine.
Yep.
So she was one of the people I spoke with. Jimmy was my first advertising call, but I spoke with Myra about it. And you know how supportive she was of stuff.
Oh, yes.
Yep. She just was gushing about how great it would be and go do it and give it a shot and all that stuff. And she probably told me about the plunge. I mean, I don't even think I knew it existed. Right, I didn't know anything. I didn't know about homecoming. I didn't know anything. I didn't know about the improvement associations. But people like Myra helped me learn that stuff. I mean, I learned a lot at the select board, but that was just, they got permission to do this, they got permission to do that. So she went to the Polar Plunge. Oh, actually, I'll never forget it because I got up a little late, and the same neighbor who called me, I was like, Nabe, before Nabe News comes home, Nabe, you got to drive me. I don't know how close I'll be able to get. We're running late. It's 9:45. I think it's going to be quick. He drove me down the first time.
Okay.
And he pulled up as close as he could, and I jumped out and ran, and I made it. And while I was there, Myra took that picture of me with my notebook talking to somebody. I'm not sure who that is. I'd have to look at my article and see who I quoted to see who that is, because I don't recognize that person I'm speaking with. But yeah, my very first story, my very first interviews, and Myra got it, and she was a historian. Yes. As you know, so she would love it. Her daughters are going to just love this.
Oh, they will.
They're going to love this little segment here. So.
Absolutely. Well, she's a beautiful soul, that's for sure, Myra.
She was a good person.
You got the best of the best to start out with.
Yeah,
so that's for sure.
She was, she was great. When she, I think the reason I knew her is when I published my book. I think I contacted her, and she didn't hold stuff back. She would just tell you what she did, tell you what she thought would be good. She didn't have that kind of, if I tell you too much, you might be better than me kind of thing. There was none of that. Right. It was just, oh, yes, you can do, this is what you do, this is how I did it, and this is how it worked out. And she kind of gushed that support to you. But I was so glad I found that, because they wanted some pictures, and I knew right where it was. I had it right in there. So
well, she appreciated getting the truth out there in a very respectful way also.
She used to give me a hard time about some of my editorials that maybe weren't as respectful as they should have been. She didn't like that.
Well, she always did things in a very diplomatic way, though.
Yeah, she was.
So so from one author to the other, many people don't know that you wrote a book.
Oh yes, I wrote a little fantasy novel called Zarina and the Medallion of Corindou. If you look on your right, there's one right on top there.
Okay.
Can you grab it? There you go.
Zarina.
Dave doesn't want us to move because it'll mess up his focusing. So there we go. So yeah, let's give a little plug for the book, huh? Ooh, it's all dusty. I think that's up there because I just had it redone a couple of different ways. So yeah, these are all the mistakes that were in whatever edition this is. So this is a fantasy novel that I wrote the first draft of when I was like 21, and it's kind of cute because you can tell. You know, I'm a writer, and as you progress, you look back and go, but it's a fun little book. And yes, I know it's been like 15 years since I wrote it, and since I published it, I should say. Should I look at the date? Oh my, I don't want to. And yeah, I'm still working on the sequel.
So sequel is to come.
The sequel is to come. I've had people say, look, I'm going to die before I get to read the sequel. And I'm like, I'm going to die before I finish it maybe. But you know what? I have a deadline business.
Yep.
And when deadline comes, as you can tell by my house, it looks like a hurricane hit it. When deadline comes, when you get into that stretch, that's it. You got to get it done. I learned that working as a typesetter at these different places. The Bay State Banner was a perfect example of just being there. There were 2 typesetters, and we would just sit there and talk and shoot the stuff and blah, 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 blah. And then all the stories would come in, and we would both just go, boom. He'd take a stack, and I'd take a stack, and we didn't talk. And then they'd go, and then we'd wait for them to proofread it and come back. And, and it didn't matter how late it was going to be. If it was 2, 3 in the morning, that paper needed to get to the printer at a certain time. And that's the same thing now with me, and it's just, it's kind of become, it's a way of life, really. I mean, it's stressful.
Sure. Well, you had mentioned that the PC changed journalism.
Yes, it did.
How has journalism changed since then?
Well, I can't say the PC changed journalism.
Okay.
It changed the way that we get a newspaper. It changed publishing.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, and printing. A lot of jobs disappeared. There's no such thing as a typesetter anymore. Everybody's a typesetter. Everybody does their own stuff. Artists, I remember when the switch happened. Artists, it was kind of beneath them to have to do the little tweaky stuff. That was the pile for those 2 in the corner. I was one of those 2 in the corner, And now, they wouldn't have it any other way. I want the headline to be exactly so, and they get to do it all themselves. So that was kind of interesting. But it's also a time thing. I mean, you had your copywriters would do the copy, and that's all they had to spend their time. They didn't have to worry about how it would fit in the headline. They didn't have to worry about how that was somebody else's problem, and so they were a little freer to do that. So it's changed that. As far as publishing is concerned, the advent of the PC, when it got to a certain point, and that was when I started my ad agency, I waited and waited and waited until, as a typesetter, how those letters fit together was very important to me. And all of a sudden you saw the shift where it worked right. Because we would do the stuff, and then you take it to the artist, and he'd be cutting it and moving it and doing all this stuff. What are you doing? I learned how to do that right away. That's one of the reasons I was in such demand, that I would do it exactly the way they wanted. But it took a lot to do that. You had to have a lot of expertise. And you had to really know what you were doing, they called it kerning. It's like, if you have a K, the letter would be way out here because it has to clear the K. But depending on the letter, you can squeeze it in a little bit more. Used to do all that manually. And now the PC, they just do that. And it works out really well. I mean, you can do that stuff if you want to. All of that still exists. I wanted to make sure all of that was still existing. And that's when I started my ad agency. It made it possible for me to do the paper because I could do it all here.
Right.
I do the whole format here.
Excellent.
The woman who had the paper before me used to still put it on paste. She used to paste it on boards and take them. I called the printer and I was like, do you still want it that way? He's like, no, I'd rather have a PDF. So, not this computer, clearly, because it's, been years, but I created the whole thing in the program, and then created the PDF, and used his FTP site. That I turned off the ringers on the phone. I didn't turn that off.
It's okay.
And then I uploaded it to his FTP, so I didn't even have to leave. It was great. It was great. It really was.
So how did you got a successful newspaper?
Thank you.
weekly newspaper, and everyone loves to see the local events and all the pictures.
Yeah.
How did COVID affect you?
COVID hurt. He shut down all the restaurants. I lost a handful. It does sound like it's a lot, but when you've only got a handful, I lost half my restaurants. My contractors stayed with me, advertising. Some of the bigger places, I really got to start getting some of those bigger places. But I lost a lot of ads, and I lost a lot of people going to start businesses, the little stuff, It also affected our coverage. I mean, no polar plunge this year.
Right.
I still went, and we managed to put a handful of people who jumped in the water, and we used that.
Okay.
No homecoming, no parades. Those were the fun things. I mean,
Right.
I remember the first year I had the paper, and I went to the Memorial Day parade, and I had a stack of business cards. I'm Beth David with Fairhaven Neighborhood News. What is it? Here's my card. I'm Beth David with Fairhaven Neighborhood. And then the next year, when I went down, it was like, oh, it's Beth David with it's the name, it's the newspaper, and then people would like take my picture and stuff. It only took about a year.
Yep.
But I went to every single event, and I was running up and down the street and taking pictures and handing out my card and all that stuff, and that was just a lot of fun. We didn't have that this year. We didn't have, and there's kind of like this pall over the world, as you know. So we were scrounging for stories. I mean, a couple of times I sent, Glenn, my photographer. I was like, go get me a cover. And he's like, what do you want? And I was like, I don't know, take a picture of a boat in the water or something. we put geese. He was going by, saw some geese in front of the high school once, and we did that. I mean, people say, don't you ever get off the neck? And I'm like, hey, give me a story. I take a picture of the we haven't had any winter. I used to love putting a picture of the frozen marsh.
Right.
And so I put one of them not frozen marsh and said, winter, where are you? I mean, that's what we were scrambling for, know.
Right.
Because the FIA used to have something in the summer. We used to have that film festival. There was always something going on where I could get a cover out of it. The happenings pages, I've managed to kind of fill them with a lot of virtual stuff, but usually I have, 3 or 4 events for every single spot I have. I spend hours on those 3 pages sometimes because I'm trying to cram the information in that they send me these whole big press releases. Now I'm publishing the whole big press releases because there's only 2 events. It's just, and it's heartbreaking for people who want to go do stuff. I mean, Christmas was tough. As you look back at some of the years, and I'm going to make it a point to get all the papers back up on the website. But you look back, and there's some years where there's like 4 weeks in a row with just Christmas. It's the shopping issue in November, and then it's just Christmas, Santa, 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 Santa.
Right.
I love Santa, so this house believes in Santa. So I have no problem. But this year it was just like one Benoit Square, and then even a cushion. They did a cushion that did a parade thing, but we didn't get to it, so nobody sent me a decent picture to use. So that was hard. It's been hard, but it's starting to loosen up a little.
Yes,
I'm very hopeful that we're going to be able to. There'll be stuff to do, and then not being able to get in the room at the select board meeting. I mean, I don't know how controversial you want to get in this. That has been an extremely frustrating point of contention with me. We should be in the room. That's a big deal with me, and I know I've been a little bit harsh in my editorials about it, and I've been getting, but you know what? This is important. This is a big deal. We didn't make a big deal the first couple of months because I thought it was only going to last 3 or 4 months. So we miss a few meetings. It's not good, but this has been a year now.
Yep.
And it's not okay. And it's to me, I'm going to try not to me, the reasons for it are not, the reasons given for it are not the real reasons. To me, it seems to be because there's this particular clash between me and the select board on a more personal level. And I think that's where it's coming from. And it's wrong. Okay? That we are the eyes and ears of the public in the room. Okay, and I had one person say to me today, well, ask your question on Zoom. No, we don't do that. We don't interfere with the meeting. Oh, I didn't know that, he said. And I was like, it's my fault for not explaining it better. And he said, what difference does it make? When they go to a recess, and you can see them talking. We should be in the room to hear what they're saying. Well, we're not saying anything that's they're not talking about anything that's on the items agenda. They know they're not supposed to do that. I said, I don't know that until I'm in the room. I need to be in the room to hear that. And then there's all this stuff that happens after. The minute the gavel hits, boom, the tape stops. Usually we walk up, we ask, you were on the select board, we walk up, we joke around, I might give you a hard time about a vote, we rib back and forth. I mean, that's also how you build your relationships with people, okay? None of that is happening now. I recognize that there's a serious hostility between me and one of the select board members, and so he's loving it that we're not there. But that doesn't mean I can't have a relationship with the other two. Yeah. And with the town administrator and with anybody else who might be. I don't need these people to be my friends. This is probably the most important thing anybody who's aspiring to journalism should know. You're not going out drinking with these people. You're not going to their parties and their barbecues in their backyard. You can go for a few minutes, but you're not going there to be their friends. If you need them to be your friends, you're in the wrong business. I have 32 cousins on my mother's side alone. And then I've got a whole bunch more on my father's side. Most of them are local. So I don't need these people to be my friends. Okay? I want to be friendly with them because that's just a human thing. I want to be able to rib back and forth and joke with them. Right. I called you a select boy, and the first time you were like, hey, after that you got a kick out of it. And I called you a few names in my editorial. You let it roll off your back. At first it's a little bit jarring, but it's just... Come on, guys, loosen up a little. You're in the public sphere now. Right.
Well, hopefully in the next few weeks or so, upcoming months, then, things will be changing. And there's, like we said in the beginning of the show, hope. Hope
is
for
it?
This year.
Yeah, we're really hopeful. I'm very hopeful.
So what's the future, Beth?
For my little newspaper?
Yes.
My hope is that it'll stay strong. I can't do this forever. It's grueling physically, my schedule, all that stuff. My hope is that I'll be handed off to somebody who will continue with it, and that I'll be able to retire someday. I don't really see that happening anytime soon. I'm a few years off. But the hope is that it will keep going and telling people what they need to know. I tell people stuff, whether it's good, bad, whether they want to hear it or not, as long as it's the truth. We do our best to verify our sources. We do our best to only publish. That's why people threaten to sue me all the time. I've never actually been sued because I'm careful. Okay, I mean, I call you a name in my editorial. No, I have a First Amendment right to do that. But when I say you did this thing that was bad, I have a reasonable expectation that it's true.
Okay. So the future is bright then for the neighborhood
I
news.
hope so. I hope
Excellent.
so.
Well, Beth, I want to thank you, and on behalf of all the residents here in Fairhaven and Acushnet for
most of them.
Yes. Well, for most of them, we like our weekly newspaper, and we can't wait till you can show the events that are coming up. And
me too.
And getting those back to having public gatherings again. So
I can't wait to be at them.
Yes. Well, once again, Beth, thank you, and
thank you,
taking this time out of your schedule for you and your dog Charlie.
My dog Charlie.
And we wish you the best in 2021.
Thanks, and same to you.
Thank you.